all the other tutors, I have explained why they are famous. Well, Lora is famous for many things, I would say. From my point of view, she is one of those people who was doing web science before it was even called web science, before people actually thought about identifying it as a topic as such. So she's been at the intersection of many communities. She's done work in e-learning, she's done work in semantic web, she's done work in personalization, HCI, and she's been doing this at the highest level with respect to research and has earned recognition in all these communities. So she's a true web scientist by design, and she will give you probably lots of examples about what the reasons why this type of interdisciplinary research is useful and exciting, and I'm really happy that you accepted our invitation.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. As Elena said, if I have 15 minutes, I probably will have 115 slides. And I have about this amount for the whole morning, and it was still difficult to fit everything that I wanted to tell you about human computing, about crowdsourcing, and basically about anything that you can't resist doing these days in terms of collecting data, analyzing it, and trying to come up with something interesting about it. So I'll give you, so we'll be together the whole morning. I'll give you just a short overview of what I'm planning to do. First, a short, very brief historic overview of what happened in human computing and crowdsourcing. Very high level, there's just way too much in order to fit in the short time we have. And then afterwards, I want to tell you about something that Chris Welty, who is giving the invited talk tomorrow, and I have been working in the last couple of years in terms of, well, crowdsourcing, everybody's using it, but what are the things which can really be, which actually matter when you collect this data, when you collect the data and when you exploit this massive amount of people collecting human semantics. And it's really the idea of introducing human semantics into machine understanding, training machines of knowing what are the people's perspectives in order to be able to detect or interpret either text or images or video or any other material online. And then I'm going to give you an example of a crowdsourcing task that we did in this sort of manner. We call it the crowd truth, so trying to find the truth in what the crowd creates as a data. And I prepared a couple of tasks for you to work on. So I'll try to go as quick as I can through the slides so that you have as much time as possible for the hands-on experience. And, well, you have also the lunch while you're eating your sandwich. You can continue thinking about this. And I hope this will also help you to think in, from a different perspective or get some new insights about your projects that you will finish. So, surprisingly, crowdsourcing, which sort of seems to be a phenomenon which only appeared in the last, what, say, 5-6 years, actually started much earlier, already in 1759, 1892, in a completely different form, where the word computer actually was used not for machine, but for an actual human being. A person who computes, it's a computer. People who were gathering in groups, individuals or individually, but their collective result were in order to compute various types of mathematical tasks. And these were, so there is a book by David Greer, When Computers Were Humans, And he gives really interesting historical view on how it comes to those tasks and how those people, these were primarily women. And during the Second World War, they were called World War II math roses, when they were doing these ballistic calculations and flight trajectories. And they were mainly women because this was sort of one of the few places they could actually openly come and have an occupation. Still very gender biased times. And further, they would even sort of starting with this trend, they would use humans in order to train and to produce, to program computers. And this is a point when I really want you to remember as well when I will talk to you later about crowd-truth, is really to understand the very essence of the added value of people making machines or training machines or giving their knowledge into machines so that the machines can interpret with the same ease as we're doing it. We see an image and we immediately recognize what it is on the image. A computer sees an image and it takes 20 years before they actually can advance the technologies in order to be able to say, well, the outline looks like a bush or a flower and so on. So, well, and so on. So there is this famous, the NASA computer room, which is actually a room filled with people computers and not machines. Again, calculating various types of, performing various types of mathematical calculations. And so, starting from there and actually going even further back in time, I want to show you sort of the sense of the wisdom of the crowd. So now we only saw people actually performing things that we now think machines are much better at doing it. But the notion of the wisdom of the crowd, which sort of extends, these were individuals and together, all together, they were calculating things and coming up with a single solution. Already in 1785, Marquis de Condorcet sort of tried to pioneer or sort of try to convince people that statistics is the best thing for democracy. So by just using statistics, you can sort of see that the collective decision of large groups of people who not necessarily need to be domain experts actually take much better decisions. So just the fact that they are the collectiveness of bringing the mass and the collectiveness of those bringing together shows a quite good way, sort of gives a very good machinery in order to make decisions. And this is basically what democracy is. You ask people to vote on things they have no idea about. They're neither politicians, they're neither policymakers and so on. But somehow together people manage to get the right decision or a good decision. And so further, there was a very interesting experiment in the context of the wisdom of the crowd by Sir Francis Galton, who did this experiment of asking 787 people to guess what the weight of an ox is. And not a single one of them gave the right answer. But together, collectively, they almost gave almost a perfect answer, which is yet another proof that basically the faults of the individual get evenly distributed and somehow taken in sort of in a trade-off when you bring the individuals together, and increasing the number of people actually increases also the quality of the final result, the precision of the final result. There was another experiment, again in the book of James Surowiecki, The Wisdom of the Crowds, with the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. An analysis of the performance during the show shows that in 90% of the time when the contestant, so you know what the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is, more or less people get a question and they have a chance, so they are allowed to get, if they don't know the answer of the question, they can ask either a single person they consider an expert, or they can ask the audience. And interesting enough, in 90% of the time, when they've asked the audience was right, compared to the 65% of the time when the individual or single person was asked. And based on this, he defines this sort of, gives a definition of the wise crowd, as he says, where the four main features. It really brings together, it aggregates together diversity of opinion. The way it is processed or collected is actually decentralized and independent from each other. So they are, those people have no other connection than performing, answering a particular question or performing a particular task. So from a very sort of experimental science point of view, this is a perfect experimental setting. So it's a distribution of your population, decentralized, independent, very diverse, and you bring it together in order to, and it's large. So that's also from experimental point of view a very good property. So now we slowly move towards basically this kind of basis of knowing, okay, there is wisdom in this crowd, and it has been proven in different areas and shows really good results. So what if you basically take all those people and intentionally make them do, not just as a side effect of the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show, or just as a sort of a small-scale experiment, but what if you actually bring humans to solve computational problems which are too hard for computers to solve alone. And basically bringing this sort of first notion of the human computers, which are people, together with the wisdom of the crowd, bring them together, and having the human computing as a new way of performing computational tasks. And Louis Renan defines it as a treating human brains as processors in a distributed systems, each performing a small part of a massive computation. That's another thing. So not every one of those people can actually sometimes correctly perform the entire tasks. So you have two ways of doing it. By really decomposing tasks into smaller chunks and giving each small chunk to individual people, and together they are performing this computation, or just giving one and the same task to everybody in order to sort of get the massiveness of and the scale of the computing. And you can see so citizen science, even though it was not in the 80s, much later, is one example of, actually not an example so much, but it was one of the things which started driving this human computing area. And why was this? So a guess, or sort of educated guess, is that science basically harbors a lot of people with passion, which are very engaged in what they're doing. Lots of people who are maybe not directly scientists themselves, but really like to do scientifically related stuff, like bird watching or train spotting, or which you might call some kind of nerdiness, but they really enjoy doing this sort of knowing everything about a particular topic. People take pride in this. So it's a very nice context in order to drive large-scale human computing. And you can see already in the 80s, the citizen science term was coined. And now you have the Citizen Science Alliance, which hosts a lot of numerous science projects done by amateur scientists or people with interest in particular topics, for weather, Galaxy Zoo, Planet Hunter, and so on. And another aspect of a big drive for human computing, and now here we enter the era where also the term crowdsourcing comes, and there is a lot of debate and discussion, so to what extent human computing, crowdsourcing, human computation, they are the same. And to some extent, I really don't think it's a very important discussion. So there you can understand conceptually some of the possible small differences between them, but they all talk about the same thing, involving large amounts of people performing tasks that are difficult for computers to perform. The 2005, the term human computation was coined by Louis van Aan, and the term crowdsourcing again in this year. And two very founding things have happened, so the games with purpose and the article in the Wired magazine, the rise of the crowdsourcing. So these were really founding elements for now human computing or crowdsourcing to really go outside of just the interested scientists, the citizen science. So it really went off to various areas, and I'm going to show you some examples, primarily in cultural heritage domain where I worked a lot, well, I had to make some choices of what to show you. Another interesting thing, the reCAPTCHA was also a very strong example for crowdsourcing. How many of you know the reCAPTCHA? And do you know why is it a crowdsourcing example?
Because it's using it to decode OCR data.
Yes, and that's the basically here in this sort of history point. These are all examples of crowdsourcing now becoming not the target of what you want to do, but the side effect. Games with a purpose. You play a game, and while you're playing, something else happens. So you do a good. The reCAPTCHAs, you're using it for a security mechanism, and while you're doing it, you're OCRing text and so on. So that's this is here different than citizen science, where citizen science is really targeted for gathering this data. Here, the gathering of data happens in parallel or as a side effect of the process of another process. And then there is the example, the most recent one, the Duolingo. How many people know the Duolingo game? Have you? Which languages did you learn? Did you actually learn them? Well, I tried many as well, never finished any of them, but it's a really nice example which shows the sort of the good evolution of the beginning of the games with a purpose into a very powerful, well-designed, didactically tool for mass people to use. So this is the ESP game, an example of the games with a purpose. This is the article in the Wired about the rise of the crowdsourcing, and here are some examples. So in the 2000s, already books appear quite a bit about crowdsourcing. There's really a diversity. This is a very small subset of games or crowdsourcing activities that you can that you can see. Lots of them targeting language processing, also scientific puzzles in folding proteins, art, games, and so on. So basically the only thing this shows, so you can never know all of them. It's good to know some key ones. So I've included only the logos. You can have a look and search more and try them out. But what this shows is really it's a mainstream process. It's in every domain, and it becomes very easy to create, easy to adapt in a way. People, let's say, I see people. So you don't have to convince at this point people that it's actually useful.
Exactly. So,
So
it's a compelling idea.
Yeah, so it becomes everybody wants to be part of it. One big problem is that all of those things basically are one-time use, one-time developed, one-time use, and lots of them just die out. They are there online, you can use them, but they are not really collecting like the Citizens Science Alliance actively collecting data. And one problem, one reason for this is that we also noticed this in the projects that I'll show you later, but this kind of games, crowdsourcing games or standalone applications, they really need all of your attention all the time. So that you need to promote it. You need to keep inviting people. You need to be the driver for people using it. That's why I think Duolingo is really a powerful example, because it takes a very intrinsic motivation in order to go there and do it. Maybe you don't have time to do it, but you do it for yourself because you want to study languages. Most of those games, you do it because you want to help a museum, or because you want to help some biology scientist and so on, because you have some free time and you just want to try out things. But the motivation is not persistent enough in order to keep you performing. So whenever you decide to build a new game, yet another game, or yet another crowdsourcing application, really think of it. Think of what does it take in order to keep campaigning about it, keep motivating users. What can you do? How close can you move towards something like Duolingo, which has intrinsic motivation or uses intrinsic motivation of people? And what do you need to do in order to keep campaigning? So here, the user interface is really fascinating, and it has evolved. I teach HCI, so I've been following them from the very beginning. And I'm really jealous about the HCI experts they have in order to develop the game. The diversity of the tasks, so they started at the beginning only based on words and text, and then slowly moved to all those visualizations supporting your process with visual images, and actually using the link between the visual and the text in order to maintain richer data set as a result of the crowdsourcing. And then we come more and more, so yeah?
Can I ask something?
Yes.
So would you consider Duolingo a game? Or is it some sort of gamified?
It uses a lot of gamified elements. It has well, you can see your performance. You can see how you're doing compared to others. For me, it's the same as, a little bit the same, games with a purpose, whether they're really games or using gamification elements. It's very difficult to say which is which. The same as crowdsourcing, human computing, human computation, and so on. But it does use explicit game elements in order to kind of make it more attractive. It has levels, so it's also very suitable for the domain, the level. You study language, you have different levels of comprehension. In games, you have different levels. So, I don't know. What
I just wanted to know how you look at it.
So, what we saw until now, basically, several individual elements, so lots of spreading of in different domains of crowdsourcing and human computing concepts. And here in 2012, Avi Bernstein, Mark Klein, and Thomas Malone published a Viewpoint article about the programming of the global brain, or considering how we can improve our understanding and utilization of the emerging human-computer network constituting the global brain. So very visionary, going now many steps forward. And what I want to show you here is also with the next one. So a year later, John Riddle publishes this article of crowdsourcing medical research, which is really a groundbreaking moment for even thinking, daring to think that something sort of like gamified people, lay people doing various tasks can actually be used for medical research. And I'm going to show you examples where we actually show how the crowd does sometimes better than actual domain experts because of their actually not being domain expert helps them to perform some of those tasks. And what I want to give you here example with those two is that we are moving. So important is to understand that now in those years we are really searching for the new challenges, searching for the grand challenges, for the scale in this, not just in number of people, but in terms of domains or larger tasks that we can solve. And I'm going to show you afterwards, and Chris is going to talk more tomorrow about the one sort of big challenge as well is to feed these hungry cognitive computing systems around us, everything that sort of requires like Siri, Google search if you wish, and so on, which require lots of data to be trained in order to perform the task at the level that we can actually service. And then there is another term I want to introduce for you, the niche sourcing. So from crowdsourcing and niche sourcing, basically finding the appropriate niche in the crowd. So some tasks really cannot be done just with anybody out there, and are much more efficient if you are able to find your niche and get them perform your tasks. And here this is the volunteer science, an example which really target these various types of niches in order to perform different scientific tasks. And well, I promised you I'll give you some examples in the cultural heritage domain. So I've been working, I think now, more than 10 years in various, with various cultural heritage institutions, museums, archives, libraries, and they are really a big drive for crowdsourcing, becoming sort of, they really took on the hype of crowdsourcing and tried to use it to their advantage. So in the era of the digital age, all the museums, all the archives and libraries were really, they didn't have any other choice. They had to put things online. So basically the attention shifted from the actual museums to the web. But on the web, people were really left by themselves, completely alone. So from a very protected and curated environment, what a museum is, all of a sudden you are left there with the millions of objects to browse around and really don't know what to do with them. You don't know anymore the story, you don't have exhibitions, and so on. So they started losing the access, really started losing the attention of their audience, and crowdsourcing became really a nice way of bringing them back, engaging them, and giving them also this one feeling that people can contribute their own perspective into the museum. They can tell to the museum, oh, on this picture my grandfather is actually depicted, and his name is this and this and this. So there are really enormous amount of projects in every country, in Europe, also in the United States, Australia. Actually, Australia Powerhouse Museum was one of the first that started these crowdsourcing activities. Really, really amazing. The Wikimedia initiative also very much supported by the so-called GLAMS. What was GLAMS? galleries, libraries, archives and museums. Yes. So we've been working together with the Beeld en Geluid, or the Sound and Vision, is the Dutch audiovisual archive, which records all the TV and radio programs broadcasted in the Netherlands. And together with some broadcasters in the Netherlands, we worked for several years on a game, video annotating game, which is called Wijsda. It's a sort of a slang wordplay for what is this in Dutch. It's an open source. We spent a lot of years on this, and finally, actually, we managed to get it to open source, which is very easy to allows you to download the code and instantiate, make your own instance of a video annotation game. So it went through various stages, and this is one of the latest versions with the show on the Dutch television called Man by Hond. I really don't know how to translate this in English. If I translate it directly, it doesn't really make sense, so I'll just keep it in the Dutch like this. So you can see the various channels. You can choose currently from 5 possible channels. For each of them, you see whether the people have already annotated and what's the highest score for them. You can see the most popular tags, you can see the top annotators, and you can see videos which are currently running and there's somebody else playing them. And this is the interface you see once you select the video. So it's a very simple input. You watch a video while you're watching, you're typing the things you're seeing. And for different tags that you're giving, you're receiving different scores. And we use the score in order to basically guide you into this side effect that we want to achieve. So if we are interested, for example, in videos, in specific videos to annotate people only, so we'll use the score in order to give you more scores every time when you give a person or give a person's name. So there are 2 levels of tags, general tags, if you say, well, there is a boy and a man, or if you say, this is Peter and this is Jan. So this will be the specific one. So the more specific you go, the more points you get, because for us it's easier. Once you give us the specific tags, we can easily reverse engineer and see that it's a boy or a man, and so on. So you can create very specific tasks which really guide your users to do, for example, only tag locations, or only tag building names, or only tag people names, and so on. So you can try to make it more efficient. People learn quickly, so once the task is limited scope, then easy, they will be very efficient of doing it. And this would be one trick, keeping them longer, at least within a session, to get as much as you can out of them. Another experience that we have is that videos are typically very long, but people's attention just doesn't last for more than a minute and a half. So if you're doing video annotation or video tagging, you really have to segment your videos to very small chunks. This creates also this kind of gaming hunger to have more, want more. If it's long, people just get bored, and we ended up in the beginning having videos that only the first minute gets annotated and the rest of the video never gets seen. Yes?
Does that hold true for content like not just video content, but like when you read something, would you want to break it up into smaller
Yes, we have the same also with text. It's much easier. So most of the text tasks that we've done them at sentence level.
Okay.
First, if you pay, depends whether you pay or not pay. But if you pay, in both cases, you want the task to be really very quick and done within 30 seconds and less. Scoping things to a sentence or 2 sentences, less than a minute or up to maximum minute and a half of a video is a very good. So if you have images, for example, and you use this grid kind of presentation, don't use too many. Maybe 2 lines of 3 or 5 images per line. Again, and always test it on somebody who doesn't know the task. In order to see, you need to know how long it takes. 30 seconds is really a lower, a very ideal one, and it has to decrease with the time. So after doing, let's say, 2 videos, it will take me 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds. So you need to really test this learning curve, how it goes. And you also, so basically what you end up there, you have a video and you have a list of things that you have collected, and you have the timestamps at the top, you can see, of each of those appearing. And you really, now is the point, what do I do with this? It's a gigantic amount of data, so, and it's basically encapsulated inside the videos. You need to always pay attention of how you can evaluate this. How can you know whether this is good or not? Is this number, is this list enough now for this? How do I know? Did I annotate everything that I wanted to? Does it cover the whole? So you can see all the tags, all the yellow stripes are only in until the half of the video, so there is nothing afterwards. So pay attention of the distribution. Pay attention of the coverage in terms of time, but also in terms of types. Try to find some kind of typing. Like, for example, here we find that we cluster them in 3 main groups: objects, persons, and locations. We identify that nobody has annotated anything related to events, and nobody has annotated anything in the scene of the videos. So these are, once you do a task, you do this kind of analysis, and then you need to derive whether, you need to decide, is this my optimal setting? Do I need to change something? Did I get what I wanted? And what do I need to change if I didn't, in order to get events, or in order to get scene annotation, or in order to increase the number of location annotations and so on. And also, what are objective ways of judging whether this is a good set of vocabulary? So, for example, we looked into mapping the set of those words into professional vocabularies, professional thesauri. And what we found out, only 8% overlap. And first we thought, well, this is a disaster. And then on a second thought, we thought, this is actually super good. Because this means that people bring in only things that professionals don't consider. And people are the ones who are searching for the videos. So if the professionals have only 8% of the overlap of the vocabulary of the people who search, it creates a very big problem for finding what you're searching for. And then we looked into the actual search logs and queries, and we found out that about 35% of the search resulted in no results, which was kind of a proof of the fact that people actually use different words in order to describe or search for videos. So it was a very good, so this means if we combine the professional annotations with crowdsourcing, we get the best of both worlds. We also found out, well, there is a 23% of overlap with Dutch vocabularies or Dutch lexicons. And when you look into this, we found out that, so if you're using lexical databases, they don't contain names of things. They do contain words that describe, but they don't really contain the name of people or name of locations. And these were many of the things we actually targeted to annotate. These were the specific words. So that's why there was this small overlap. But the good thing was that almost 90% of all the words actually yield a meaningful Google query, which means they were not gibberish, they were real words. So you really need to understand what is the type of analysis that you need to do once you collect data in order to understand, was this a good task? Did I perform, am I satisfied with the results, and do I want now to go and send hundreds and hundreds of videos through this task? Well, you can go further in the analysis in terms of seeing what kind of typos people make, what kind of synonyms they use, and so on. We can go endlessly here. I can really talk to you only about this. So we did another experiment with images with a tool called the Accurator, where we used the Rijksmuseum collection, Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, collection in order to annotate prints, their print collection with lots of, they have two types of prints, very big collections with flowers, birds, and castles. And what they found out, they have no in-house expertise of knowing what those flowers are, or birds, or castles. So they, besides saying, okay, there is a flower here, and transcribing what's written in some of those, they really can't say anything, anything else about this. So, and birds and flowers are very big communities of people online who actually know a lot about this. So we decided to experiment with actually using online niche communities of bird watchers and flower people in order to make them, create a tool for them where they would be able to annotate specific names of flowers, annotate really various parts of it. And what we also did is we connected this to the vocabulary of the Natural History Museum. So now you would be able on their website, on the Natural History Museum website, for every specimen of a bird or flower, a real picture, they can also see artistic representations, and the other way around in the Rijksmuseum. We also created it in a gaming environment, so we tested it two settings. One which is sort of a game where people can verify already collected results, and one for more serious people. So we haven't compared yet the results between the two. We are still doing this. Yes?
Did you, maybe I just missed it, did you have levels in this? And yes, how did you?
No.
No, okay.
No. But so in the other, in this interface, you can identify for yourself. You can indicate, I am a flower expert or I'm a castle expert. So we use this in order to sort of bring out of the collection things that potentially are in your. And we use first machines to kind of identify, to see whether there is actually any potentially there is. Which print has a higher chance of having a flower or a bird or a castle on it? So we created this environment and the game environment, trying to see, and also performed the crowdflower and Amazon Turk experiments in order to see what's a good workflow. It's a very difficult thing, very difficult task, because current image analysis tools just do not deal with this kind of monochrome prints. They don't recognize anything. Color doesn't mean anything for them. Shapes are way too artistic, so they can't recognize anything. So we can't pre-process much in order to see whether there is any indication. But you can potentially give to a completely lay crowd, and they can tell you, is there flower, castle, or a bird? And then give through the game or through paid crowdsourcing, and then give those for experts to, so use them in order to cluster, make clusters of flowers, birds, and castles sub-collections, and give them to experts to quickly give you the specific names. And you can do this also in gaming, so if you don't have experts, because experts also you have them, but you can't control when they would want to do a task. We also wanted to experiment whether we can use some of the paid crowdsourcing and the experts' result in order to train a game and try to be able to detect the best candidates of what we have from the paid crowdsourcing. So I can talk to you about this also for hours. I'm happy to give you demos and show you more afterwards. What I want to move forward is to tell you again, it's extremely important to take in consideration the analysis of your results, to keep monitoring what's going on. And for this purpose here, we also built specific monitoring sort of administrative interface where you can define campaigns, you can see how individual workers or a group of workers or the whole crowd of workers is doing, how part of the collection is doing. And you're interested in knowing if you have 100,000 images. Now, what can I say about, at this point of time, whether I am, how much, I'm 30% in the process of actually annotating them all, or I'm 70%, or all of them have people annotations, or all of them have flower, at least one flower annotation, and so on. So you need to be always very conscious about your evaluation metrics, to know what is your success measure. And not just on the tags that you're collecting, but on the people you're using, and to know how they compare, how the paid workers compare to the people who play the game, how the people who play the game compare to the experts, and so on. Are there different peaks in their behavior, different trends in their behavior, and so on. And I think one of the, so I'm very generally, I'm going to sum this up by saying, well, it's all about bringing everything to you. So, and all the things are connected and they're dependent on each other, so they influence each other. And it's and they are indeed social machines at the end. So they're not, even though they are individuals, distributed, independent, they bring in together something in one system, they do the same in another system, and it's your role as a web scientist, as a data scientist, in order to study their behavior in the different systems and understand what are dependencies, what are things you need to always keep in mind, and what are the workflows. So you basically, you want to define workflows which work in order to solve particular tasks, and you want to provide this to your fellow researchers to reuse in other tasks. That's the ultimate goal at the end. So how I still have time? Sorry?
10 minutes.
All right. So I'll start with the second part. Now I want to introduce to you the challenges for which computing or computer science around us actually creates for crowdsourcing. And one of the challenges is that, well, we're surrounded with a lot of complicated systems which want to contextualize their behavior to us. You have Google Now, which tries to give you currency exchange, weather reports depending when you are, or push recommendations. You have Siri, which answers questions. So these are all very complex problem-solving situations. And they all, because they're contextual, because they're very personal, they really only will work if machines are able to process perspectives, if machines are able to really distinguish between, now this bottle for me is a small bottle, for somebody is a big bottle, and we're both right from our own perspectives. Another example which Chris Welty is going to talk to you about, I'm just going to glance over it, is the Watson computer, which is one of those examples of cognitive systems which required a lot of training and in order to be able to understand and answer open domain questions. And all of those are examples really of cognitive systems, cognitive computing systems, which have three main characteristics. And they typically expand the human cognition, so they help you perform particular tasks easier. They learn as you use it, so they keep adapting to using your interaction as a way of understanding better and correcting their mistake. And they interact naturally, so you ask Siri natural language questions. You're not typing a stripped down query. Google now doesn't even ask you, you don't even ask a question, so it tries to predict or sense what you need. So these are three features which require really demanding for the way systems behave. And main problem is that this kind of cognitive systems, as I said, they really need a lot of training data in order to be able to understand, to perform these complex tasks. And as you can see, I really think the Borg is the ultimate way of assimilating knowledge and sort of the ultimate cognitive computing system which assimilates knowledge from multiple people. So basically the ultimate crowdsourcing tool and cognitive computing as well. So, and the solution is, well, it seems like crowdsourcing is really a good candidate to use human annotation through crowdsourcing. And here it's important that it's a crowdsourcing augmented with machine processing. It's really important to know for all the tasks that you have is what can machines do so far, and use the power of the machines to help you prepare your task for the crowd or process the results from the crowd so that you can do good analysis. So the crowdsourcing by itself is not, will not be enough and will not scale unless you combine it in efficient human-machine cycle. And, well, all those systems train typically by being given a gold standard. So basically, you give them example. Gold standards is an example of, okay, this is black, this is small bottle, this is red pencil, this is blue pencil. So depending on the task you want to test, you give the positive and the negative examples as a sort of a gold standard, and the machine knows these are the right things to know. But what's wrong with this? They're really, the way until now the gold standard has been collected and used seems to be very biased towards the assumption that there is a perfect solution, the assumption that there is always one right answer, and the assumption that forcing people, annotators, to agree when creating the gold standard actually creates good training data. And I will give you further on examples, and I hope I'll be able to convince you that this is really a fallacy of one truth. The fact that there is one truth, that it's always perfect and that it's measured through agreement of annotators. And our claim is really that this assumption pervades the computational semantics, and it really needs to be broken in order to support creations, or support better the creation of cognitive computing systems and their training. And from the books that I showed you earlier, there is this completely independently the same statement as we said, that best collective decisions are a result of disagreement rather than of consensus or compromise. And really the NLP world and the machine learning world has been for years forcing people to agree in order to have a measure to measure this gold standard. And our main claim is the same: disagreement is good, disagreement is beautiful, and it's not a noise. We should not try to avoid it, we should actually try to harness it, but it's not an easy task. I probably, it's better to take a break now. So, I mean, I can continue going, but I think you really need coffee. And I'm going to show you, give you some examples of how to harness this multiple truth. Maybe your brain got confused.
Also with others, we were discussing what the actual definition of crowdsourcing is when we talk about the complexity of tasks. So we talk a lot about micro-tasks, yeah. But in one study you also named Wikipedia. It's a much more of a wider problem. Writing an entire article is not that micro and so the way crowdsourcing is commonly referred to, are we referring just to micro-tasks or anything where the crowd is actually contributing?
So I will give you my perception on this, and I think crowdsourcing or human computing is a tool which you can engage in different ways. And it's the same as with any other machine. You have a problem and now you have to know, so if your tool is crowdsourcing or human computing, how can I use this tool in order to solve my problem? And very often you need to really look at the big problem and split it in smaller ones and create a workflow in order to use, workflow of micro tasks in order to solve it, because it's too big. So you deal with individual people. In paid crowdsourcing you also do, they're called micro tasks and micro payments. Large tasks are difficult, expensive, people don't take them. So they get motivated of the fact that they can learn them easily. So the quicker, the smaller, the quicker, the smaller, the easier. So it is, yes, crowdsourcing is a tool, but then your problem gets split into micro tasks in order to solve it. Does it make sense?
From that point of view, though, then Wikipedia is an exception in a way, because it starts from one individual taking the initiative and writing a new article. It is not definitely a micro task first, and then perhaps the micro edits follow. It's a bit of an exception in this model, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you still have the larger problem of actually writing about a particular topic. And if the first one takes the task to write, I mean, you can also start by writing one paragraph. So it's very subjective or very dependent on what you're writing. But it's still one larger problem. I need to write an article on a particular topic. And I write this paragraph, somebody else writes another one or corrects mine and adds other things. So I wouldn't say it's much more different. I think it's different by the fact that there is the phenomenon that actually it keeps working and keeps having this sort of intrinsic motivation in it. Another thing is that you have to realize that it seems like a very large crowd effort, but actually it's a niche that solves the task. So it's more a niche sourcing, in my opinion, than a real crowdsourcing experience. Okay. So, well, this is where I ended. I hope I managed to convince you disagreement is a signal and not a noise. It's not something that we need to avoid, but rather embrace and harness. But harnessing it is a difficult thing. And what I'm going to do right now, show you examples of how we decided to do this. Let me start with some examples where, for example, if you see these three sentences, and if you ask yourself the question, does each of those sentences express the treat relation between the highlighted terms? In the first sentence, antibiotics are the first-line treatment for indications of typhus. Patients with typhus who were given antibiotics exhibited several side effects, and antibiotics in short supply. DDT was used during World War II to control the insect vectors of typhus. So to what extent and how those sentences express the treat relation between antibiotics and typhus? And you can argue that there is a difference, that each of them expresses it in different ways. And if you give this to all three, to micro workers, and from also our experience, you will get a picture like this, that there is very high agreement on the treat relation between antibiotics and typhus in the first sentence, a little bit less in the second, and much less in the last sentence. Yes?
Is treat an acronym?
Treat is like antibiotics treat typhus.
Oh.
So the treat is the relation between.
Perhaps it was an acronym.
No. Just I capitalize it to draw attention to it. And what you can see that the level of agreement or the level of disagreement here really reflects the level of clarity in the sentences. The first sentence is extremely clear that the antibiotics treat expresses the treat. And the second one, patients with typhus who were giving the antibiotics experienced several side effects. You can deduce that antibiotics treat typhus, even though they exhibit side effects. And in the third one, you really need to think about it in order to get to the relation treat. And very clearly here you see from the agreement or disagreement of workers, it's not whether the two are related with treat, but actually that the sentence themselves express it in different way. And I think that's an important thing for you to remember, that the way people annotate or interpret text or images or videos is also dependent on the clarity of the text, videos, and images. So if you give a non-clear sentence, you cannot expect that there will be a high level of agreement. So people will disagree because of the lack of clarity. So another example, what is the relation between the highlighted terms, in this case gadolinium agents and fibrosis? In the sentence, gadolinium agents are useful for patients with renal impairment, but in patients with severe renal failure requiring dialysis, it presents a risk of nephrogenic systemic fibrosis. Doesn't matter whether you understand the sentence or not. Just linguistically, in processing this sentence, is there a relation, and what is the relation? And some people can argue that it's a causal relation. Gadolinium causes fibrosis. Or it can also, some other people can say, well, it's actually, fibrosis is a side effect of using. And in some sense, both of them would be correct to some different extent. And here, the disagreement between some people, let's say 60% of people say that it's cause and 30% say it's a side effect, the level of disagreement here indicates that there are different alternative interpretation of the same sentence. And that's a second point. On one hand, in the first one, we saw that it's indicating of clarity of the actual text. And here, the fact that you can interpret it from different perspectives. And those two things are important to capture. In both cases, the disagreement between the annotators is a good indicator for those qualities, those features. And then if you look at the same, those two sentences on the antibiotics are the first line treatment for indications of typhus or quinine. What's the English word? Quinine. Quinine is not a reliable cure for malaria.
Quinine.
No, quite. No, you're right.
Quinine.
No,
Quinine. Okay, so we have a converging disagreement. So you can see for the two sentences how 5 workers have responded, and you can use their different responses and disagreement in order to capture or to find indicators for the quality of the workers themselves. Whether a worker continuously disagrees for all the sentences in the same way with the others, and whether choosing the same answers for all the sentences and so on. So these are the three conclusions that I want you to sort of remember, and also important for the hands-on. Not every sentence is as clear as anybody else, so they have a different level of clarity. Every sentence can be interpreted by different people in different ways, and they both can be truthful. These interpretations can be truthful from different perspectives. And different workers have different quality, which can be also, all three can be seen through the level of disagreement on their answers. So these are based on examples. We try to find a way or a framework to explain why disagreement happens, to try to formalize it in a sort of framework where you have 3 agents that play a role. So we have the sign, which is interpreted by an observer, or in the cases that we in the cases of the sentences that I gave, basically you have a sign or a sentence or a word in the sentence that is perceived in some way by the observer or the worker, and using a particular frame of reference interpretation in order to indicate what this sign refers to. So every observer will have their own frame of reference in order to interpret different signs. And those 3 corners of the triangle are the 3 types of examples of disagreement that I showed you. So here you can see we have the sentences which are annotated by workers, and in the cases of the relations, so you ask them to find particular relations. So this is the frame of reference. So you can put every crowdsourcing micro-task into this kind of triangle, where you give to a person, whether it's an expert crowd worker or just the engaged gamer, you can give them sentences, you can give them images, you can give them videos, and you can ask them to annotate particular things. You can ask them to annotate relations, to extract terms, to annotate locations, people's names, and so on. And what is important is that disagreement can allow you, capturing disagreement on all 3 sides can allow you to develop metrics to measure the quality of the worker, the clarity of the sentences or the images or the videos, and also the clarity or similarity or ambiguity of the type of annotation that you're asking them to do. And what is important, so this is just exemplifying, what is important is that it's basically the triangle also facilitates you to identify dependencies between them. It's not just that we can see who are the good workers, which are the good sentences, and which are the clear relations, But once we identify the good workers or the bad workers, actually, we can take them out of the equation, take out the bad workers in order to now calculate again the clarity of the sentences. And you can do this the other way around. If we can identify the ambiguous sentences, the non-clear sentences, we can also take them out of the equation and try to recalculate again our metrics for the workers. So in this sense, you're not punishing people for giving them difficult tasks or bad tasks to do. And the same also dependency between relations or the interpretations and the science. So we have developed 3 sets of metrics, what we call worker metrics, sentence metrics, and relation metrics. And in the worker metrics, what we try to see is different ways of using the disagreement in order to compare and analyze the worker's behavior. So on one hand, to see how much a given worker disagrees with the rest of the crowd per given element, per given sentence, or an image, or whatever you're interested in. You want to see consistent behavior. Are there consistently like-minded workers? So you want to see whether this is just an outlier or consistent behavior. And you want to also generate some kind of averaging behavior per for an entire set of elements, either for a given type of annotation. Does the worker behave the same way if I ask them to annotate people or if I ask them to annotate locations? Is it consistent across tasks? So what typically crowdsourcing platforms give you currently are ways to analyze workers' behavior within a particular task, but they really lack the bridging over tasks. So you want to know, for various reasons, how they perform across tasks, so on a single sentence, on a batch of sentences, and on different types of annotations. And you want to know this sometimes also because you want to, if you want to do niche sourcing, you want to find the niche of people who actually do well locations. They not necessarily need to know to do well people annotation, for example. So we develop these kind of scores and see when, according to the scores, rank the workers in a combined measure for their quality. Okay, so I have animations I didn't anticipate. So then you have sentence metrics, and the same here. You're really interested in order to find out what's the clarity of each individual sentence, but you also want to know what is the relationship, what is the score between the sentence and the type of annotation that you're doing. So this is the sentence relation score, because here we are talking about relation annotations. But if you want to see to what extent the sentence expresses locations or events or anything else, so you want to know the score between the expressivity of the sentence for the given type of annotation. So you want to be able to rank your sentences or images or videos according to their clarity level and their expressivity level. And you want to do this because if you identify the ones that are very ambiguous and very bad, because we are creating a gold standard here, we can cherry pick. We can decide, well, take those out because they're not good training examples. We want to train machines, so we want to give them the best. That's why it's called gold standard. So you want to give them the, so when you take them out, you also, in this sense, don't punish the workers for giving them bad tasks, and you recalculate your worker metrics and rank again your workers according to their quality only on the clear sentences. The same also with the relations in this case. If you have relations which are very close to each other, like side effect and cause, people always will choose, there will be always people who prefer to choose cause versus side effect, and others will prefer a side effect. And this happens because the semantics of the relations just overlap too much. So if you take this in consideration and either merge the results of all the workers on those two relations, or do another way, or maybe take away one of the relation and leave the other, depends on your task, you can have different solutions. You again are not going to punish people, the fact that they disagree for something that's very similar to each other. And finally, the relation metrics. So, as I said, relation similarity, relation ambiguity. If it's for example, we did this for medical domain, and the relation diagnose is a very specific medical relation where diagnose is always defined in medical terms as a test being performed in order to diagnose. But for regular people, diagnose, I look at you and I think you're ill. So so there is a different sense of the interpretation of the way there is a formal definition and the way I perceive as a worker. So there could be ambiguity in a sense that just people perceive them in different ways. So we saw this in several tasks that people would annotate continuously with diagnose, and the experts would never use diagnose because there was no test mentioned anywhere in the sentence. And then when you look at this, is another example, you really need to look at your data and try to explain why something has happened and see whether you actually want to keep supporting this behavior, or you want to avoid this behavior, and in that sense you are going to change the setting of your task. So based on this, we decided, well, we need to call this, we need to sort of summarize this behavior or this set of metrics into something we thought sort of fits well. Gold standard is also another way of referring to gold standard is ground truth, and we decided to sort of do a wordplay instead of ground truth to call it crowd truth, and which has those characteristics. It's really sort of supporting disagreement, harnessing disagreement in order to find the signals in your data set, in your annotation tasks, and in your worker population, and give us lots of measures for ambiguity, vagueness, similarity, overgenerality, and so on, which are very valuable when you do interpretation and when you want to have cognitive systems around you being able to interpret, contextualize, and adapt to users. And important as well is that it really helps you capture human semantics. So this is the missing piece in the puzzle, to really put human semantics into machines so that they can be, if you remember the 3 features of cognitive computing system, they really to extend and support our interaction with the world around us. Okay, so I can help you try it out. It's not very easy right away. I'm not going to focus the tutorial further on this. I want to now switch to the beginning of my hands-on session to give you directly, to walk you through a task as we created it, and then give you a chance to, I've selected a very challenging task for you. So you can choose your groups as you are working on the projects, or groups of 2, whatever suits you best, in order to work on the hands-on task. So let me see well, before I continue, are the things that I'm saying, talking about, do they make sense?
Yes.
There's one thing that sounded contradictory to me, or perhaps I got it wrong. At a certain point you say that low quality workers, there was a slide, the one about worker metrics, are the ones that agree in small communities but disagree with the larger communities. This is the way I interpret that. I don't know if you can go back to the slide. That sounds like let's kill innovation. So if you have small teams that agree against a larger majority, they must be wrong. They are low quality workers.
Well, I don't. Well, I'll switch to the. Let me switch to see. This is an issue that can happen.
Yeah, this one.
Which one?
So, low quality workers generally have high scores in both, which means that they disagree with the crowd, but also they are consistently like-minded workers. So I infer that if there are people who agree, but they disagree with the majority, they are low quality workers.
You can the fact that you consistently are like-minded workers. This could be just the same similar behavior in terms of spammers behave similarly. So and it's so this basically first shows, well, if you continuously disagree with the rest of the crowd, and there are also others like you, and they typically behave in a similar way. So they trick in various but similar way. The thing is that it's a very thin line in order to find out whether something is a spam or is it, as you can say, it could be something that is a specific type of interpretation, and only some group of people have it. Well, it's a danger that you can get into it, but most of the time, the metrics that we use here are actually very clearly chosen, that if you behave in this way, we have identified metrics which are specific for spammers in that sense. For example, if you have a sentence and we ask you choose all the relations that hold between those two terms. Typically, in a typical situation, more than 2 relations at a time hardly ever happens. So if somebody, spammers typically, they randomly choose, so they will choose more than 2. And this is a behavior, like-minded behavior, which indicates...
No, I think you're confusing that one.
No.
That metric is not for identifying, it's for rewarding like-minded.
Yeah.
It is for, that metric is for capturing subgroups that disagree with the majority but agree with each other. Spammers don't ever agree with each other, they're random.
Well, but the example that I gave, there is groups of, we know that if you if you choose more than 2, on the average more than 2 relations, you're a spammer.
Yes, but they will never choose the probability that a group of spammers will all spam exactly in the same way is very low.
Yes,
yeah.
that's
so
true.
They will do similar things, but they will not provide the same answers. Whereas
the kind of agreement that this metric captures isn't randomness.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not saying, oh, these 2 guys are random. We're saying these 2 people agree with each other. They're picking the same choices as each other, even though the rest of the crowd is not. These 2 guys tend to agree on these sets of questions.
Yes, so this solves the situation where if you only use the first metric, they will be considered as spammers, or they will be ignored. You have the second one in order to make sure their contribution actually is taken as a
they're just different, not just spammers.
Yeah, they're different, but they're additionally also the fact that they disagree with the crowd. It's capturing what I wanted to say is that spammers have particular, for every task, you more or less know what would be a spammer behavior, or through running many tasks, you are going to discover what are the different spam behaviors.
So what would you do? Because in a way, if these metrics are, I don't know to which extent they're transparent to workers, but the second thing, the like-minded workers metric could be gained as well. So if you have someone having 5 accounts giving exactly the same random, you know, they're repeatedly doing the same thing over just some picking a random, well, not a random, but picking one answer and then giving it 10 times, then it would get a high score there, but it would still.
Yeah, well, this could possibly happen, but it's very difficult. The tasks are relatively, if they are really randomized, they have to really remember their choices.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to duplicate your answer 5 times exactly the same. They will somewhere and they try to do it as quick as possible, so random is as quick as possible. We discovered through using it lots of different ways, so we kept on, basically the templates that I'm going to show you, we ran them probably 6 or 7 different times with different settings, because every time we would discover in the beginning different types of spamming, even to the extent that there were bots, spammer bots, which were trying to basically, whenever you have a multiple choice, they will just fill in the multiple choices. So we had to create a template in which there should be something typed, and then you cannot use the, or you have to select, highlight the word in the text, which cannot be done by a spammer. Or you need to, for example, say, count the first 3 words, type the 3rd word in the sentence in order to prevent this kind of spamming. Okay. Oh. Okay, so as I said, so you have a problem and you need to decide now, how do I split this big problem into micro tasks or into smaller problems that the crowd can solve. And one thing, maybe this is not extensive and complete, but from our experience, these are basically situations you can create tasks or questions to the crowd in different settings. So you can have a crowd basically giving a multiple choice question where they can choose only one answer. So only one is a valid, so you cannot choose more. Another way would be with multiple choice where you can choose multiple answers. For example, multiple answers is the example with the relation extraction that I showed you. You can choose more than one relations which are answer to the question. But if you, for example, ask what is the direction of the relation, is it from antibiotics to typhus, antibiotics treat typhus, or typhus treats antibiotics, this would be falling into the first single answer, so only one direction can be possible. And then you have, so these are constrained, the first 2 are constrained tasks where you know what is your answer set, and you ask people to vote on the answers you give them. But however, there are lots of examples of questions to the crowd which are open questions, to which you don't know the answer. And this is the typical situation also when you want to create a gold standard. Very often, like with the example with the privacy that you told me, you basically don't know. You have a situation, you have a text, and you want to know which are all the entities in this text. So you don't know a priori what would be the final set. So these are typically open questions. They can, they require open answers. So they could be either you type something or you select something from a text. Yes?
Couldn't you just imagine for the entities, couldn't you just imagine a multiple choice with all the words?
So, yes, I'll come there. So what our intention is basically to try to convert every open task into one of the first two options. And why do we want to do this? Because you want to be able to evaluate the results of your crowdsourcing. So the first ones are very easy. If you have five multiple choice, five answers, you can say 50% of people chose answer 1, 20% answer 2, and so on. If you have an open question, you cannot compare. So the goal is really every time when you have an open question is to try to think of how can I smartly now define my question in such a way that I have an answer vector. And also try to have combinations. So to not think of with one task I'm going to solve my entire problem, but what could be a sequence of tasks or several tasks which combine different closed questions and maybe open questions. So one other way would be, well, give an open question. Here is a sentence. Give me all the references to people's names in this sentence. So you give it to 100 people or whatever, 100 sentences to lots of people. They extract all the people's names, and now from this result you try to create an answer space and give it to another set of people to vote on it. This would be one way of combining open question with constrained question. And I want to walk you through, because I kept on giving you this example with the relation extraction. Now that you're a little bit more familiar with it, I want to walk you through the way we did this. To give you an example, so basically we had from the IBM Watson group, we had a set of medical texts, and those were processed by machine, and from each of those they were split in sentences, and in each sentence 2 medical factors were identified through machine. Independently of how this is done, this is our input situation. So we have sentences with 2 factors identified, and what Watson wanted to train on is say, well, we want to be able to recognize 11 type of medical relations: treat, diagnose, side effect, cause, and so on. So they were also selected in a specific way, the most popular relations in a medical vocabulary. So, so basically we created, tried to create a task in which it was an easy task. It was a closed task. We had 11 relations, we had sentences with 2 factors, and we could ask the following questions. Select all the relations that are expressed in the sentence between the factors. So this was already a different way of creating the task than what was typically done until now, the annotation task by medical experts, because we actually allow them to choose more than one relation. So the medical experts until this moment, they were forced into choose the relation between this, and sort of they tried to narrow down the definitions of the task and relations so that they keep choosing similar relations. So we allow them to choose more than one relations, and we also allow them to say there is actually no relation expressed in the sentence between those, or there is a relation expressed in those between those 2 terms, but it's a different one than one, and it's not among the list of those 11. And this is very important because you really cover now all the options for the annotators. Did you want to ask?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, do you know if people who answered the task were knowledgeable of English?
We selected only native English native speaking. So we decided that we are going to run this task. We run it on Crowdflower and on Amazon Turk, and only selected UK, US, Australia.
Mm-hmm. And the second question, because I think you explained it, but I didn't quite get it. So 11 relations can choose from can be quite daunting. And
Yes.
Would it have made sense to maybe think of selecting 3 of those 11, or would it have been possible, feasible?
We thought as well, so we actually had in the beginning much more than 11 because they were like, you have treat and treat by, so treated by. So we had all the 2 directional, and there were many more. So we first ran the task with both sides, and we actually decided people really cannot distinguish between the directions. So we decided to just have one expression treat without indication what is the direction, and then run another task where we ask them for the actual direction, which is very simple. Single choice. Once they identify what the relation is, it's much easier to say now typhus, does typhus treat antibiotics or antibiotics treat typhus? So 11 I will show you. So here these are, I just wanted to show, I will answer your question with this. Just wanted to show you, we did a lot of effort in order to really make very simple instructions. Really simplify the instructions to the bare minimum. And this was everything they were getting. And compared, it's really an important thing to, a nice fact to know is that the medical experts were really given elaborate descriptions of the task and guidance of how to do. And we try to actually keep it to the very minimum, and this, the more, so through several iterations we managed to find sort of a clarity level of instructions which seemed to work very good for the workers. And we also gave them some examples to support them as well. And during the task, this is how the task was done. So these are the relations they got. And indeed, when you say 11, there are a lot, but when you see them here, they don't really seem so much. And one of the choices that we made is you really don't know how to split, how to select the 3 or the 4 or the 5 that you're going to use. And it will be potentially more cost ineffective, because then you have to run one sentence with the first 5 and then with the other 6 or in 3 batches. They really didn't have a problem.
But you had no prior knowledge as how probable
So
it
there
is
is
that some of them would have been more likely to hold than others of these 11?
No. So, well, I take that back. There was each sentence with a pair of terms came with a potential seed relation. Again, machine predetermined. So through a distance supervision process, a machine decides, a software decides, well, in this sentence there is a high chance that between those 2 terms there is a cause relation. But we mixed all of them and really tried to, first we used only from one the same seed relation, but then we decided we don't want to bias, so we noticed that they keep on, as soon as the word, and typically the machine would put higher as probability of this relation holding if the relation is mentioned in the, so if there is the word cause in the sentence, even if it's not between the 2 terms that they just get biased. So we try to eliminate sentences which actually contain those as well, and we mixed all of the seed relation sentences so there is no bias. And on a mouse over, you see the definition, a very short, I now realize I didn't do the right screenshot, but there is a mouse over, very short definition of each relation. We first ran it by giving the definition directly here, so all sorts of versions, but this was the cleanest way of doing it with the tooltip. And here you can see actually it's probably the next, yes. So you can select, so we asked them select the relations which hold between those terms, and also as an evidence, as a sort of a spam trick, also select the words in the sentence which indicate, which made you think there is this relation holding. And this is one way of sort of double checking and creating a way of possible contradictions between people. So if a spammer randomly chooses something, will also randomly choose, so there is an even bigger chance of disagreement when we ask them to do this. And there is another also spam sort of trick, or how do you say?
To filter out.
Yes, to sort of prevent spam. Is if you have selected there is no relation in the sentence, you have to give an explanation. So spammers typically would type here gibberish because they would know, or something. Either will cut and paste the same answer on every sentence. So this was a very, we didn't process any of those answers. We could, but we didn't spend time to. We only looked at the repetitions and non-meaningful input here. And you can see the exact definition of the task also in Mechanical Turk. How many of you actually, sorry I forgot to ask you, know about Crowdflower or Mechanical Turk? Okay.
I used that.
Okay, so for the ones that don't know, so there are two main platforms for paid crowdsourcing, Crowdflower and Amazon Mechanical Turk. Originally, Mechanical Turk, and still to this extent, is much more US-based, US target in terms of people who provide tasks. Because you need to pay with American credit card, and you have to have a social security number in order to register. Crowdflower was the sort of non-US and more European alternative. And the two differences between them is also important to know. Mechanical Turk tasks run longer, typically, but have much less spam, because you cannot create double accounts, where on Crowdflower you can endlessly, you can have 100 accounts if you want. So if you're a spammer, you'll do everything in order to optimize your spam behavior. Also, Crowdflower is an aggregator of different worker channels. So they are there are more than, I think, 50. Elena, do you know how many channels? More than 50 for Crowdflower. It's a really large. They constantly change, and they are of different sizes. So you have very large worker populations. So Crowdflower does not control the workers. It only aggregates the channels. You can choose which channels you want to. If you have any insights on which channels provide less spammers or more spammers, you can try to avoid the ones with more spam. So we identified through our experience, we identified for crowd, but they indeed change so quickly. This is not a reliable data. After even half a year, it will might not be still holding. So if you run one and the same task on Crowdflower and Mechanical Turk, you will definitely get different results. And it's difficult to say which will be better, because on one hand, on Mechanical Turk, you might get better, higher quality, less spam, but it will take more time, and often it is more expensive. Mechanical Turkers tend to negotiate for the price. So tend to pressurize the requesters by refusing to do a job for a particular. They have those Turker nations and lots of forums where basically they discuss the requesters, and they can really damage your reputation if they are unhappy with you. Where Crowdflower workers are much more anonymous. So there is no place where they interact or discuss. They're much more, they really scales more. So tasks run quicker. They are on the average for the tasks that we were running about 2 to 3 times cheaper. And almost the same amount of shorter in terms of time. but you have to account, depending on the task, between 10 to 15% spam. If you have defined your task really carefully in order to actually be able to catch them. So it is something to know for each task to basically run it on BOD. It's good to know how it performs on BOD and decide which results do you want to use and how do you want to merge them afterwards and so on. So it's not, but there is no common rule to say do this or do that. You just simply try to do it as identical as possible in order to be able to compare the results afterwards. So there are other things that you need to take in consideration when you're setting up a task. So the task that I showed you and this sort of disagreement harnessing tasks typically work if you have a lot of workers on per sentence or per image. We run them between 10 to 15 workers on a sentence. This means we calculate the disagreement metrics based on a very high population per single item. This, of course, increases the time a task finishes and increases the costs. However, we found out in previous experiments that going lower than 10 for some tasks actually provides unreliable results. And it very much depends on your answer vector. If you have, like in the relation extraction task, you have 11 relations to choose. If you have 3 people, or 4 people, or 5 people, imagine how sparse your answer vectors will be. So you really need to consider the number of judgments or annotators per item based on what your answer vector is. For some tasks, like relation direction, where on a given relation you want to know what is the direction, there are only 3 choices, this way, that way, or no relation. So you can actually lower it down. It's an easy task, but you have to make sure there is some kind of spam control, either a gold question or another entry, because it's an easy task, it will be very desirable for spamming as well. So another setting which to consider is whether you compose a task out of multiple sentences or multiple images or multiple videos or one. So when you pay per task. So we typically give 1 sentence, 1 task. There is a consequence. So things people influence. They see their answer on the previous sentence. If you put 2 sentences together, they might influence. The second answer might make be influenced by what you answered in the previous one. Yes?
There's actually a lot of ethical debate about the payment being so low. And there are systems that Mechanical Turkers and Crowdflower users use to report researchers that pay too low for the tasks that they assign. So I'm wondering how you integrate that feedback into the way that you design your payment systems.
Yeah, so, well, we take different, so the feedback from Mechanical Turk is quite useful to actually know whether we are too low or too high. And typically you start with something, so you measure the time it takes to do the task, and there is some kind of accepted minimum wage, hourly wage per task. So you calculate the time it takes for a single sentence to do and see whether, so these tasks on the relation extraction actually go to an hourly rate around the average. It looks very low, but the speed they can do and the learning curve is pretty high, so they can actually with the time increase their hourly wage, even though we pay the same.
So you've gotten that based on feedback?
Based on looking at our results, not their direct. So Crowdflower doesn't give you feedback because you pay for, you don't interact with the workers. For the MTurk, we got answers from workers, for example, that it's too low payment. But sometimes they will tell us, give us more tasks. So,
yeah, no, I'm talking about systems that are external to the mechanical Turk and crowd. There are communities of people that work on these sites, and they talk about and rate the researchers. So it's like
yes, these are like Turker Nation.
Yeah.
So we still score good there. So we've not been banned or not been. Our reputation is good. So I think Anka, you have been looking lately there, but I don't. I'm not aware that we have been bed mounted or something like this. So we try to make a fair estimate. So you want to make sure, if you know what the average is, or what the target is, you can calculate, you can see how close you can go to this. You don't want to go too high, because once you give too high price, you can't go down. It's really a negotiation with the Turkers. It's really a negotiation. Another thing that we also noticed is if you give too big batches, so a task, let's say I want to have 100 sentences annotated with the relation, with medical relation. So if I put in one batch all the 100 sentences, this task is going to take a long time. Turkers log in every day and they look at, so the tasks are ranked by recency. So if your task is too old, it's going to go down the list. So you need to also make a calculation, payment versus number of workers versus the size of your batch, to make sure your task stays within 1 day, gets finished within a day or shortest possible time, so that it stays at the highest. And consider splitting in smaller batches, but not too small, because then you can't really compare within the population of the given task. You have to aggregate results. So what is the size of a batch which will keep, you can run every day new tasks, and they will keep finishing within 24 hours. So that would be your ideal goal. So we found out that batches for our sentences, batches of 30 to 35 sentences, finish relatively quick. If you have an easy task, you might increase the number of batches as well. So these are tasks that take up to a minute. So this is a minute task. So they take longer, but you have smaller, you might increase the number of batches per task. Another thing to consider is number of items that are allowed. Yes, what's the time? Number of items that are allowed for workers to do within one batch. If I give a batch of 30 sentences, and if I allow every worker to do all the 30 sentences, and if I have 10% of spam, this means so this is going to create way too much noise in my results. So you can limit. In a batch of 30 sentences, you can say, well, each worker, one worker can perform only 1/3 of the size of the batch. And like this, you limit the possible damage from spammers. Of course, this again slows down your task. This means if somebody does quickly, they will, and really like this task, they have to wait until tomorrow when you post another one, another 30 sentences. So these are all things which contribute to the speed, in terms of the efficiency and the quality of your results that you will get further. And as I said, so because these are really language interpretation tasks, we decided that we're only going to limit to native English speakers in order to make sure they at least understand the language they're reading. Another things to consider, gold questions. Many people use gold questions, so these are questions to which you know the answer. They are typically used for two reasons. You can use gold questions to train your population. You can give them before they start the task, and this would be like a training. You can give, let's say, 5 sentences and tell them this is how the task would look like. If they pass this, they qualify and they can do the real task. Or you can use them in order to verify whether they are spammers or not. Gold questions are very effective, but they're very difficult to get. And they also go against our type of tasks. We don't know the answers of the tasks. We say there is not only one right answer. So it's very difficult to create gold questions. Some people use gold questions which are completely different than what you're asking, or some kind of generic, automatically generated question which you always know it's a nonsense, so the answer is no, or there is no, it doesn't make sense. It's difficult. You can also use some of the highest 100% agreement answers from your previous tasks. You can use them as possible gold questions. At least you have the evidence from the crowd that nobody else thought of anything else. So you could more or less assume that this could be possible with gold questions. So don't use gold questions if there is ambiguity. So better not use them, try to use other ways of spamming. And also make sure they learn. So for each task, you have to, if you start using gold questions and you run tasks, hundreds and hundreds of tasks, you have to continuously get new ones. Here, once you run the task, now you get the results. And the results, as I mentioned, are stored in an answer vector. And for our task, the 11 relations that we give as possible answers, the answer vector basically is the count of each worker for selecting a particular relation for a given sentence. So how do we do this? Based on each sentence, the answer, so this is the worker vector. So this is the answer of one worker for one sentence. So this worker selected 3 relations, symptom, manifestation, and side effect. And then if you look at all the workers for this given sentence, you get this matrix, and you sum up, and now you get for, let's say this was side effect, you have 5, for cause you have 3, for what diagnose 4, and so on. So you get the sum, and this is now your sentence vector. The first one is the individual worker vector, and this is your sentence vector. And now this vector really can tell you something in terms of the metrics that I showed you before. So if you take an example of a sentence, is hyperemia related to conjunctivitis? So the one worker vector, sorry?
There's agreement between you.
So one worker vector could be like this, and the aggregated worker vectors. Okay, so how do I go back? Okay. So the aggregated worker vectors build the sentence vector, and now we know that for this sentence, the relation, there is the top relation between the top voted relation for this sentence is this is not side effect, symptom. This is symptom. 13 people voted for symptom, 4 people voted for manifestation, which is very close in meaning as a symptom. 1 person said it's a causal relation, and 2 people said it's a side effect. And you can see here, there is, so even though there is a very clear agreement on the one particular, the ones that got more than 1 vote have some semantic similarity also with the top one. So when you have a lot of distribution of different type of relations or answers in a sentence, in the result sentence, this indicates high level of disagreement between the workers. And the high level of disagreement is indication that the relation that is expressed between the 2 factors is not very clear. So the sentence is not very clear expressing this relation. So the sentence relation score will be quite low. And this disagreement shows it. So people cannot agree what exactly is the relation between. If you have, on the other hand, something like this, the lack of disagreement is now an indication of a clearly expressed relation between the two sentences. And this is the representation of those metrics that I showed you before, using the same set of worker results in order to show clarity of a sentence and clarity of expression of the type of annotations that you are interested in. And so in order to do this sentence relation score, we typically take the cosine of the unit vector and the sentence vector in order to measure this clarity, worker relation clarity. And we do similar cosine measure in order to compare the worker sentence vector, so the answer of the worker on a given sentence, with the entire sentence work, in order to see how much a worker disagrees with the rest of the workers on a given sentence. And another thing that I wanted to show you, so this is a screenshot from Excel, where you can see every row is a sentence, and every column is one of the relations that we have given. So just by looking, and here you have the clarity scores. So the top low clarity score going into the high clarity score. So you can see the ones on the top have hardly any hard agreement. All the agreement, the top agreement happens either in no relation or another relation. So this is a very clear indication that the relations we are looking for are not well expressed in this set of sentences. And you can see the clarity score that we calculate based on those metrics clearly indicates this as well. So as you go lower, the clarity score goes higher, and you start getting dark spots which indicate higher agreement. So as soon as you start, and then the lower you go, the high, so I've now reverted it, so with a high clarity you see there is typically one relation that is selected by most of the workers. So you can just, even without looking at what exactly the numbers are, you can, by ordering your sentences through your clarity score, you can clearly see how the disagreement aligns with the clarity score. And here I've shown this. This is, you cannot read the numbers, but you can very clearly see these are very clear sentences, only one relation. And they are very unclear sentences on top. There is no dark spots. And here in the middle, you have sort of distribution of disagreement. You have top relation selected, but it's not by all workers. They're kind of split between multiple. So those would be typical candidates where you have relations which have similar meanings, and people cannot choose which of the two is more relevant. And what this example, we try to, so with the crowd truth software, so it's a framework, software framework, which really is aimed to help you this kind of visualizations in more sophisticated graphics. So you can see, for example, for every, so jobs are alternatives, so that's how Crowdflower, they call them tasks. What's my time? How I'm doing?
10 to 12.
How much more time do I have?
This is the hands-on time.
Now it's the hands-on already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. So, well, I can, so I'm not going to go into those slides. I'm going to show, because they're complicated graphs, basically to try to support working automatically, calculating those metrics and looking them over population of workers and various different types of tasks. So for each job, you can look at, we provide also averages so that you can see each particular job, whether it goes up or lower than an average, and so on. You can look at very specific workers, spam workers versus good workers. You can automatically select them. And you can also see the distribution of judgments per worker per sentence, and again compare them to averages in the entire collection. And you can see here we again give this support of pivoting tables, so heat maps for the entire population of sentences. So this I'm going to skip for the moment, I already told you. And now, well, I thought you can work in groups of 2, but now today in the morning I saw you were groups of 3 and 4. It's up to you how you want to split it. But I've prepared the task for you. And I kind of accounted for an hour. Now I see I have 40 minutes. But, well, I think you can continue working on this task also later today. Well, or maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. You wanted to work until late, so maybe after when you come back from the excursion. I'm really interested to see your insights on this task, because it's a very challenging task. It's an open question task. And basically, what I give you 3 scenarios. You can choose one scenario. So 3 open-ended tasks, and you can choose one of them. And what I ask you to do, try to propose solution. And try to propose at least 2 alternative solutions to the task you chose. Either as a single microtask, or sequences of microtasks, or alternative sequence of microtasks. And for each task setting, also for each solution, propose a task setting. How many workers per sentence or video you're going to see, what the task, what would be the payment, and also propose what would be the metrics, what would be your success measures to know whether your task, which of the 2 settings you have defined will be better. So think of trade-offs. You might never want to be able to say this is better than the other, but you can say something, you might want to say, well, in this setting, I'll gather my results much quicker, but I endanger having much more spam and be more expensive. This one, it will be the same expense, but it will take longer, but I will have no spam and it will potentially have better results. So try to propose the way to measure the outcome, and then perform analysis, but specific analysis in terms of the time and cost, so these are the trade-offs, and then to know whether the quality is the desired one, whether actually your task really gathers the results you wanted or you are asked to gather. And if you have time, I can help you and can guide you to the ones who have not used Crowdflower or Enter. I can help you do this in to define it in one of the 2. Or if you already have accounts and you're used to, you can try to define it and try it on the internal, try it with people around here in the internal interface. I think it's really nice to try and see, and I want to see to what extent you actually can do this conversion from an open task into a closed, controlled setting. Here are the scenarios. Scenario 1, so correct medical factor spans. What we found out in the previous task is that we give the machine identifies 2 terms in a sentence, but because it's a machine, very often it actually is not correct, it's not accurate. So some of the terms are not complete, they're partial. Like if you see here, acute headache, instead of putting the highlighting acute headache as one term, it only highlights headache. Where actually, if you want to see whether there is a link between acute headache and some kind of test, and like we test, very often it happens that it highlights test, but it doesn't take the screening test, so it's meaningless if it doesn't take the modifier for the test. Or sometimes it's too generic, it just says disease or test, and it doesn't make sense. You cannot say that things are related at this general level. So correcting in the sentences that I showed you, correcting this kind of factors or phrases is a very challenging task because it has to be done manually. So you really need to know, and you don't necessarily need to have domain knowledge in order to do this. You can very clearly see those are partial or some of those are generic. So what would be a way for you to propose a single microtask or a set of microtasks which can help completing? I can afterwards show you what is our solution, but I don't want to bias you. I want to see whether you can think of alternative solutions yourself, and then use the result in order to do the ranking of the sentences and the ranking of workers and the factors, in order to experience this application of the metrics, the quality metrics, and see what do they tell you as a final result. Is this clear? Does it make sense? So another scenario is you have, typically for TV programs, you have descriptions, and people try to find, some descriptions are very long, and you don't really know which of the words in the descriptions are essential in order to identify what the program is about. So you can define a task or set of tasks in order to identify the key phrases. You can use prior to that the machine or software to parse and do entity extraction, but you can extract a lot of things. You still don't know which of those are the most meaningful ones. So on a given text, imagine it has been highlighted, so some words were highlighted by named entity extractor. You can define a task in order to see which of those entities are the key phrases in order to identify the meaning of the description. Imagine here that the machine can have identified very irrelevant and sort of generic entities, or the machine can have missed some that are important. So here the goal is to try to find the ones that are key and identify what their type is, whether it's a person or location or something else, and again do the ranking. And then the third scenario is now given a video clip, with some supporting textual descriptions like title, basic metadata, and description, you want to now identify where are the important words actually mentioned inside the video. So linking in video, in the stream annotations of the video with the general descriptions. Very often the general descriptions are way too general, and in the video you mention things which are much more indicative of what the video is about or the program is about. So you want to use the in-video annotation and link them to the textual annotation in order to identify again the key phrases describing this. Here I say optional because bear in mind that sometimes videos come without those. So not always, they sometimes will be very long, sometimes very short, sometimes completely missing. So consider this situation as well in trying to solve those tasks. And again, run the videos at the end. Well, I managed to go through my slides, but we now have only 30 minutes. So make your choice. I can run them once. And so I think you have the slides in the Google Drive, so you can have a look at the 3 scenarios again. And I can walk around to Anka as well. She's quite familiar with those tasks. Can maybe help me in covering the room if there are questions. And yeah, my suggestion is start it now, and if you have time later today or tomorrow, try to continue. I'll be here tomorrow the whole day. We'll be very interested to hear, or incorporate it in your project. So that's killing, what is it, 2 birds with 1 stone. Here you go.